Rachel stood in her simple wedding dress in a village church, marrying Thomas, a humble farmer with soil under his fingernails. Her ex-husband Leonard burst through the doors, laughing cruelly. "You left me for a dirt farmer? You've really hit rock bottom." But what Leonard didn't know about the man in the simple suit would destroy him. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our dramatic stories. And to my loyal family who've been rocking with us, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church in the small farming village of Greendale, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Rachel stood in the vestibule, smoothing down her simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn at her first wedding. This dress had cost less than the shoes from that previous ceremony, but as she looked at herself in the small mirror, she'd never felt more beautiful. "You ready?" asked Martha, Thomas's aunt, adjusting the wildflower crown on Rachel's head. Rachel smiled, genuine joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. More than ready. 8 months ago, she'd been Mrs. Leonard Morrison, living in a downtown penthouse, wearing designer clothes and dying inside. Leonard had been charming during their courtship, attentive, successful, impressive. But the moment they'd married, he'd transformed into someone else entirely. For 7 years, Rachel had endured his verbal abuse, his constant reminders that she was lucky to have him, his control over every aspect of their lives. He'd monitored her spending, criticized her appearance, belittled her dreams of starting her own business, and isolated her from friends and family. "You're not smart enough to run a business," he'd said repeatedly. "You should be grateful I'm successful enough to support us both." The divorce had been brutal. Leonard had fought her on everything, using expensive lawyers to drain what little savings she'd managed to hide. In the end, she'd walked away with almost nothing, just her clothes, her grandmother's jewelry, and her freedom. Freedom had been worth everything. 6 months after the divorce, Rachel had been at the Greendale Farmers Market, trying to stretch her meager budget, when she'd met Thomas Whitfield. He'd been selling vegetables from his family farm, and when she'd fumbled with her change, dropping coins everywhere, he'd knelt to help her pick them up without a trace of impatience or judgment. "These tomatoes are beautiful," she'd said, embarrassed. "Grew them myself," Thomas had replied with a warm smile. "And they're half price if you promise to come back next week and tell me how you liked them." She had come back, and the week after that, and every week for 3 months before Thomas finally asked her to dinner. Thomas was everything Leonard wasn't. He was patient, kind, and treated her like an equal. He listened when she talked, valued her opinions, and never once made her feel small. He worked with his hands, lived simply in his family's old farmhouse, and found joy in honest labor. When he'd proposed 2 months ago, kneeling in the middle of his sunflower field with his grandmother's simple gold ring, Rachel had cried tears of pure happiness. "I don't have much," Thomas had said, his brown eyes sincere. "I can't give you penthouses or designer clothes or fancy cars, but everything I have, I want to share with you as an equal partner. I promise to respect you, cherish you, and never make you feel less than the incredible woman you are." Rachel had said yes without hesitation. Now, standing in the village church surrounded by Thomas's farming community, people who'd welcomed her with open arms despite her city background, Rachel felt a peace she'd never known in her expensive former life. The music started. Rachel took a deep breath and began her walk down the aisle. Thomas stood at the altar in a simple but well-fitted suit, his face lighting up as he saw her. There were tears in his eyes, and Rachel felt her own vision blur with happy tears. The pastor, an elderly man who'd known Thomas since birth, smiled warmly as Rachel reached the altar. Thomas took her hands, and the calluses on his palms, evidence of hard, honest work, felt like home. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Thomas and Rachel in holy matrimony." The church doors slammed open with a bang that echoed through the small sanctuary. Everyone turned. Rachel's heart sank as she recognized the figure silhouetted in the doorway. Leonard. He strode down the aisle, his expensive Italian shoes clicking on the worn wooden floor. Beside him, clinging to his arm like an accessory, was Vanessa, his girlfriend of 3 months, a aspiring model who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. "Sorry to interrupt," Leonard called out, his voice dripping with false cheerfulness. "But I just had to see this for myself." The pastor looked flustered. "Sir, this is a private ceremony." "Oh, I know," Leonard said, stopping halfway down the aisle and making a show of looking around the simple church. "I just couldn't believe it when I heard. Rachel, you actually went through with it? You're really marrying a farmer?" He said the word farmer like it was an insult, his lip curling with contempt. Rachel felt Thomas's hand tighten around hers, but he remained calm, his expression neutral. "Leonard, leave," Rachel said quietly but firmly. "You have no right to be here." "No right?" Leonard laughed, and Vanessa giggled beside him. "I was your husband for 7 years. I think I have a right to make sure you're not making the biggest mistake of your life." He gestured at Thomas dismissively, "though clearly you already have." Vanessa took out her phone, clearly recording the scene. "This is too good," she whispered, not quietly enough. Leonard walked closer, looking Thomas up and down with obvious disdain. "So this is the upgrade? From a penthouse to a pig bin? From a corporate executive to... What exactly do you do? Shovel manure?" The congregation stirred uncomfortably. Several of Thomas's friends stood, but Thomas raised his free hand slightly, signaling them to wait. "I farm," Thomas said simply, his voice calm and steady. "I work the land my family has owned for 4 generations. And yes, sometimes that involves manure." Leonard burst out laughing. "Oh, Rachel, you really did it. You went from the top to the absolute bottom. How does it feel knowing you traded down so spectacularly?" "The only thing I traded," Rachel said, her voice stronger now, "was misery for happiness, abuse for respect, and I'd choose Thomas's honest work over your cruel words any day." Leonard's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Enjoy your poverty, Rachel. Enjoy your simple little life in your simple little farmhouse with your simple little man. Don't come crying to me when you realize what you gave up." He turned to Vanessa, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come on, baby. Let's get out of this place. It smells like failure." Vanessa giggled again, her phone still recording as they made their dramatic exit. The church doors slammed shut behind them. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Thomas turned to the pastor and said calmly, "Shall we continue?" The pastor blinked, then smiled. Yes, of course. Where was I?" "Ah, yes. If anyone has objections to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." He paused, looking pointedly at the closed doors. Soft laughter rippled through the congregation. Seeing no further interruptions, the pastor continued with a slight smile, "Let us proceed." Rachel looked up at Thomas, this man who'd remained calm and dignified through Leonard's cruelty, who hadn't felt the need to defend himself or prove anything, who knew exactly who he was and didn't need validation from anyone. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Thomas whispered back. "And Rachel? He has no idea what he just walked away from." Rachel assumed Thomas meant walking away from her, but the small smile playing at the corners of Thomas's mouth suggested he meant something else entirely, something Leonard would discover very, very soon. The ceremony continued without further interruption. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Rachel with such tenderness that she forgot all about Leonard's mockery. The village community surrounded them with cheers and celebration, and for the rest of the day, Rachel basked in genuine love and acceptance. That evening, at the simple reception in Thomas's barn, decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers, Rachel saw Thomas excuse himself to take a phone call. He stepped outside, and through the window, she saw him speaking seriously into his phone, his posture changing subtly to something more authoritative. When he returned, he was smiling again, pulling her into a dance. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's perfect," Thomas said, spinning her gently. "Absolutely perfect." What Rachel didn't know, what Leonard had no idea about, was that in his pocket, Thomas carried a phone that had just received a message from his corporate lawyer. Confirmed. Board meeting scheduled for Monday. All shareholders notified, including you. Morrison will be there. Thomas smiled as he held his new wife close. Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. Rachel woke up in Thomas's farmhouse on the morning after their wedding, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. The room was simple. Wooden furniture, handmade quilts, a vase of wildflowers on the dresser. So different from the sterile, expensive penthouse she'd shared with Leonard, yet it felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. Thomas was already up. She could smell coffee brewing downstairs. Rachel smiled, wrapped herself in a robe, and padded down to the kitchen. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitfield," Thomas said, pulling her into his arms and kissing her forehead. Rachel melted into him. "I love the sound of that." Over breakfast, Thomas explained the farm routine. "I know it's different from city life," he said gently, "but if you want to learn, I'd love to teach you." Rachel did want to learn. Over the next weeks, Thomas patiently showed her everything: how to tend the vegetable gardens, care for the chickens, understand the rhythms of planting and harvest. Rachel discovered she loved working with her hands, seeing the direct results of her labor, being connected to something real and growing. The village community embraced her warmly. Martha taught her to bake bread. Old Mr. Peterson shared stories about Thomas's grandfather. The other farmers' wives included her in their weekly gatherings, never once making her feel like an outsider. Meanwhile, Leonard was busy making sure everyone knew about Rachel's downgrade. He posted on social media constantly, photos of his penthouse with captions like, "Hey, some people trade up, others settle for farmland." Pictures of expensive restaurants with Vanessa, tagged with living my best life while some people shovel dirt. His friends commented with laughing emojis and mocking remarks. Vanessa posted selfies with designer bags, captioning them, "Know your worth, ladies. Never settle." Rachel saw some of the posts friends sent them with concerned messages, but she found she didn't care. Let Leonard mock her. She was genuinely happy for the first time in years. One evening, as she and Thomas sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rachel noticed something odd. A sleek black car had pulled up to the farmhouse, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. "Mr. Whitfield," the man called, "I have those documents you requested." Thomas stood. "Thank you, James. I'll be right there." Rachel watched, curious, as Thomas walked to his study, a room he kept locked and had told her was just for boring farm paperwork. When Thomas returned 20 minutes later, Rachel asked, "Who was that?" "Just business stuff," Thomas said casually. "Nothing to worry about. How about we drive into town for dinner?" Rachel let it drop, but she'd noticed things before. Important-looking mail that Thomas quietly filed away. Phone calls he took outside. The expensive laptop she'd glimpsed in his study, completely out of place in their rustic farmhouse. Saturday came, and Rachel joined Thomas at the weekly farmers market. They set up their stall with fresh vegetables, homemade preserves, and flowers. Rachel found she enjoyed interacting with customers, sharing cooking tips, seeing people's faces light up over fresh produce. Then she heard it, the distinctive sound of Leonard's luxury car. He pulled up right in front of their stall, windows down, music blaring. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, her phone up and recording. Well, Leonard called out loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "If it isn't the farmer and his wife? How's the simple life, Rachel? Enjoying your vegetables?" Other vendors and customers turned to watch. Rachel felt her face flush, but Thomas simply continued arranging tomatoes, unbothered. "Those tomatoes are $2 a pound if you're interested," Thomas said calmly. Leonard laughed. $2? Vanessa, baby, show them what we spent on lunch today." Vanessa giggled, holding up her phone to show a receipt from an exclusive restaurant. $300 for one meal. Can you imagine? "I can't," Rachel said quietly. "I also can't imagine being so insecure that you need to flaunt your spending at a farmer's market." Leonard's smile tightened. "Insecure? Rachel, I'm living in luxury while you're literally selling vegetables from a folding table. Who's really winning here?" "I am," Rachel said simply. "Because I'm happy. Are you?" For just a moment, something flickered in Leonard's eyes, something that looked almost like doubt, but Vanessa was recording, and his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Come on, Vanessa, the smell of poverty is overwhelming." He revved his engine and sped off, leaving dust and exhaust in his wake. An elderly woman who'd been shopping at the next stall walked over to Rachel. "Don't you mind him, dear. My late husband used to say the emptiest barrels make the most noise." Rachel smiled gratefully. The other vendors nodded in agreement, and several customers deliberately came to their stall to buy things, offering quiet words of support. That night, Rachel found Thomas in his study, the door slightly ajar. She knocked softly. "Come in," he said, and she entered to find him at a desk with dual monitors, spreadsheets, and documents covering the screens. This wasn't farm paperwork. This was corporate finance. "Thomas," Rachel said slowly, "what exactly is all this?" Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Sit down. I think it's time I explain some things." Rachel sat, her heart pounding. "I haven't lied to you," Thomas began carefully. "I am a farmer. This land has been in my family for generations, and I love working it. But it's not my only occupation." He turned one of the monitors toward her. Rachel's eyes widened as she saw holdings, investments, corporate shares. The numbers were staggering. "My great-grandfather was smart," Thomas explained. "He didn't just farm. He invested in agricultural technology, bought shares in food processing companies, acquired land strategically. Each generation has built on that foundation." "So you're—" Rachel couldn't find the words. "Wealthy. Yes. Very wealthy." Thomas ran a hand through his hair. "I live simply because I choose to, not because I have to. I wanted someone to love me for who I am, not what I have. After I was engaged once before to someone who only wanted my money, I decided to keep this part of my life private." Rachel processed this, her mind racing. "Is there anything else I should know?" Thomas pulled up another document. At the top, she saw a familiar name, Thompson Industries, Leonard's company. "I own 35% of Thompson Industries," Thomas said quietly. "I'm the largest private shareholder, and there's a board meeting Monday morning where I'll be attending in person for the first time in 5 years." Rachel's eyes widened. "Leonard will be there?" "Leonard will be there," Thomas confirmed, along with his department heads presenting their quarterly results. He looked at Rachel seriously. "I didn't marry you for revenge, Rachel. I married you because I love you. But I won't lie, I'm looking forward to Monday." Rachel found herself smiling. "Can I come?" Thomas grinned. "I was hoping you'd ask." Monday morning, Leonard Morrison walked into Thompson Industries feeling on top of the world. His department's quarterly presentation was ready, his new suit was sharp, and today he'd finally meet the mysterious shareholder who controlled 35% of the company. "This is your chance," Vanessa had told him that morning, adjusting his tie. "Impress this shareholder, and you could be looking at a VP position. Then we can finally get engaged." She'd held up her hand meaningfully. "I'm thinking at least 3 carats." Leonard had kissed her and promised her the world. Why not? Everything was going his way. The boardroom was already filling when Leonard arrived. Senior executives, department heads, and board members took their seats around the massive oak table. At the head sat Marcus Chen, the CEO, looking more nervous than Leonard had ever seen him. Leonard nervously awaited the mystery shareholder. Marcus warned he was particular. When Thomas Whitfield arrived at the boardroom with Rachel, Leonard was shocked. Thomas revealed he owned 35% of the company and ran a massive agricultural business. He criticized Leonard's operations division for underperformance and presented multiple HR complaints against him. Rachel, now Mrs. Whitfield, confirmed the pattern of Leonard's abusive behavior. Leonard was suspended and escorted out, humiliated and alone. Vanessa, Leonard's girlfriend, left him after seeing the viral wedding video and realizing his financial irresponsibility. Leonard faced social media ridicule and potential criminal charges for expense fraud. Rachel and Thomas returned to the farm, working together and reflecting on fairness and accountability. Rachel led a company audit, interviewing employees, confirming Leonard's toxic environment, and documenting expense fraud. At dinner with Marcus, Thomas explained Leonard's behavior prompted his direct involvement. Rachel recommended termination and reporting fraud. Monday, Leonard met HR and the board. Rachel presented the findings. 15 employees confirmed harassment, and Leonard had committed $70,000 in expense fraud. He was terminated for cause, with no severance, facing potential criminal charges. Leonard was offered a repayment plan to avoid prosecution. Alone in his penthouse facing foreclosure, Leonard's life had unraveled. He signed the agreement the next morning, his signature shaky. As he handed it over, Rachel was there, professional and distant. "Rachel," he said desperately, "can we talk, please?" She looked at him for a long moment. "What would you like to say, Leonard?" "I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for... Are you sorry you did it? Or sorry you got caught? Sorry you hurt me, or sorry the consequences finally found you?" Leonard had no answer. I forgave you the day I left. Not for your sake, but for mine. I'm not carrying that weight anymore, but forgiveness doesn't mean trust, and it doesn't mean rescuing you from what you've earned. She walked away, and Leonard knew it was the last time they'd speak, as anything other than distant acquaintances. The next weeks were brutal. Leonard moved into a studio apartment in a cheap part of town. He sold everything he could, his furniture, his watches, his designer clothes. It barely made a dent in his debts. Job hunting was humiliating. His reputation had spread throughout the industry. No one wanted to hire someone under investigation for fraud, someone known for creating toxic environments. Finally, desperate and running out of money for food, Leonard did something he'd sworn he'd never do. He drove out to Greendale, to the farm, and knocked on the door. Thomas answered, unsurprised to see him. "Can I help you?" "Leonard, I need a job. Any job. I'm not asking for charity. I'll work, Leonard's voice cracked. "I have nothing left." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then called into the house. "Rachel, could you come here?" Rachel appeared, and Leonard couldn't meet her eyes. "He's asking for a job," Thomas said. "Are you serious?" Rachel asked Leonard. "I have no other options," Leonard admitted. "I'm 3 weeks from eviction. I've applied everywhere. No one will hire me." Thomas and Rachel exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. "We need help with harvest season," Thomas said finally. "It's hard manual labor, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., minimum wage plus room and board in the workers' dormitory. No special treatment." Leonard felt what little pride he had left crumble. Working for his ex-wife and the man he'd mocked, living in a dormitory with farmhands, manual labor under the hot sun, but he had no choice. "I'll take it," he whispered. "One condition," Rachel added. "You attend therapy, weekly sessions. We'll pay for it, but it's non-negotiable." Leonard nodded, defeated. "Be here tomorrow at 5:30 a.m., Thomas said. "We start early." As Leonard drove away from the farm, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the broken man staring back. 6 months had passed since Leonard arrived at the farm, and his hands now bore calluses he'd never imagined having. The soft, manicured hands that had once signed contracts now gripped shovels, hauled feed bags, and worked soil from dawn until dusk. The first month had been pure hell. Leonard had shown up that first morning at 5:30 a.m., completely unprepared for the reality of farm work. By noon, his back was screaming, his hands were blistered, and he'd vomited twice from exertion and heat. The other farm hands, men and women who'd worked the land for years, watched him with thinly veiled amusement. This was the fancy executive who thought he was better than everyone. Now he couldn't even load a truck without needing a break. Thomas never showed him mercy, but he never showed cruelty either. He simply expected the same work from Leonard that he expected from everyone else. When Leonard complained, Thomas would say quietly, "You wanted a job. This is the job." Rachel kept her distance those first weeks, watching Leonard struggle with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Was this genuine humility or just another manipulation? The mandatory therapy sessions were brutal in a different way. Dr. Williams, a no-nonsense therapist in town, didn't let Leonard hide behind excuses. "You didn't become abusive because you were stressed," Dr. Williams said during one session. "You were abusive because you believed you had the right to control another person. That's not stress. That's entitlement." Leonard wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. She was right. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. Leonard learned the names of the other workers, names he'd never bothered to learn when he'd been an executive. He learned their stories, their struggles, their dreams. Maria was saving money to bring her mother from another country. James was putting 3 kids through college on a farmhand salary. Elena was an artist who painted in the evenings after 12-hour days. These were real people with real lives. And Leonard had spent his entire adult life dismissing people exactly like them. One afternoon, 3 months in, Leonard made a mistake that cost them half a day's work. He'd secured a load incorrectly, and it had shifted during transport, damaging equipment and spilling produce. The old Leonard would have blamed someone else, made excuses, deflected responsibility. Instead, Leonard walked into Thomas's office that evening and said, "It was my fault." I didn't double-check the straps. I'll stay late all week to make up the lost time. Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. No lecture, no punishment, just acceptance of the accountability. That night, Leonard cried for the first time in years, not from self-pity, but from the weight of truly seeing himself. By month 5, Leonard had become a different person. He woke before his alarm, actually enjoying the sunrise over the fields. He ate meals with the other workers, listening more than talking. He found satisfaction in a day's honest work, in muscles earned through labor rather than expensive gym memberships. One evening, Rachel found him sitting on the porch of the workers' dormitory, reading a book about sustainable farming. "Can we talk?" she asked. Leonard set the book aside. "Of course." They sat in silence for a moment, the farm peaceful around them. "I owe you an apology," Leonard said finally. "A real one. Not because I want something, but because you deserve to hear it." Rachel waited. "I was cruel to you. I controlled you, belittled you, made you feel small because it made me feel big. I took your kindness for weakness and your love for granted." Leonard's voice cracked. "You deserved so much better than who I was, and I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." Rachel's eyes glistened. "Thank you for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness beyond what you've already given. I don't expect us to be friends. Leonard looked out at the fields. "I'm grateful you and Thomas gave me this chance to become someone better." "Are you?" Rachel asked. "Better?" Leonard considered. "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying." A week later, Thomas called Leonard into his office. Leonard's heart raced. Was he being let go? Instead, Thomas offered him a position managing one of Whitfield Agricultural Holdings' smaller facilities. "You've proven you can work hard and treat people with respect," Thomas said. "This facility needs a manager who understands both the business side and the human side, someone who's learned humility." Leonard was stunned. "Why would you trust me with this?" "Because people can change," Thomas said simply. "If they're willing to do the work. You've done the work." Leonard accepted, but not with his old arrogance, with genuine gratitude and determination to prove himself worthy of the trust. A year after that, Leonard was at a company gathering when he saw Rachel and Thomas across the room. Rachel was visibly pregnant, glowing with happiness as Thomas's hand rested protectively on her belly. They were laughing with a group of employees who clearly adored them. Leonard approached carefully. "Congratulations," he said genuinely. "Thank you," Rachel smiled, her hand on her growing bump. "You look happy," Leonard said. "Both of you." "We are," Thomas replied, no hostility in his voice, just simple truth. Leonard meant to walk away, but Rachel stopped him. "How are you, Leonard?" "Really?" "Better," Leonard said honestly. "I'm managing the northern facility, dating someone kind who challenges me to be better, living modestly and finding it's enough." He paused. "I see now what I couldn't see before, that you didn't downgrade when you left me. You upgraded. And I don't mean Thomas's money. I mean his character." "That means a lot to hear," Rachel said softly. As Leonard walked away from them, he felt something he'd never expected to feel looking at his ex-wife with another man. Genuine happiness for her. The narrator's voice emerged, weaving the final wisdom. "And so the village learned that the richest soil lies not in what grows on top, but in what's cultivated beneath. The woman who chose love over luxury found both. The man who valued status over character lost everything, but in losing everything, found himself. And the farmer who lived simply revealed that wisdom wears work boots, and true wealth is measured not in what you own, but in who you become." What did you learn from this story? Would you have given Leonard a second chance? Have you ever judged someone by their appearance only to discover their true worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories about humility, transformation, and life's greatest lessons. Remember, never judge a person by their work, judge them by their character. Until next time, stay blessed and stay humble.